In the summer of 1876, a cruel decision forever changed the fate of an innocent little girl on the dusty plains of New Mexico. Left alone, hovering between life and death, when the silhouette of a lone cowboy appeared on the horizon. What neither of them knew was that their meeting would trigger a series of events that would become one of the Wild West's most touching and devastating legends. The story begins where most tragedies do. Sarah Winters was only 9 years old when her father died of typhus. Her father, Thomas Winters, was one of the most respected horse breeders around Santa Fe, who had lost his wife, Sarah's mother, 3 years earlier. The grieving father soon remarried, taking Margaret Caldwell, a widowed woman who had moved to the city. Margaret never hid that she was only interested in Thomas's wealth and social status. When the man died, she quickly discovered that Thomas had accumulated significant debts in recent years. The estate, the horses, everything was lost to creditors. Nothing remained except Sarah, another mouth to feed. On a hot August dawn, when the sun had barely emerged, Margaret packed some belongings, hitched their only remaining horse to the wagon, and told Sarah they were going to Santa Fe to start a new life. The sleepy girl climbed onto the wagon, holding her father's old pocket watch, the only item she had managed to hide from her stepmother's greedy eyes. They traveled for hours across the endless plains. The sun was high when Margaret stopped the wagon by a small creek. She told Sarah to pick wildflowers, saying they would bring luck in their new home. While the little girl gathered flowers on the nearby hillside, Margaret turned the wagon around and drove away. By the time Sarah returned, she only saw the wagon's tracks in the dust. At first, she didn't understand what had happened. She waited for her stepmother to return for her. She sat on a rock, holding the wildflowers and the watch. 1 hour passed, then 2. The sun was climbing higher, the heat was almost unbearable. Sarah finally understood the truth. Her stepmother had abandoned her like an unnecessary burden. The 9-year-old girl knew she couldn't stay by the creek, but she also knew that walking on the open prairie was life-threatening. She remembered her father's advice: if she ever got lost, follow the water. The creek bed at least provided shade and water. Meanwhile, Jack Holden, a 35-year-old cowboy, was on his way to his property in Colorado. Jack had worked as a cattle driver for 15 years, and in recent years had managed to save enough money to buy a small plot of land. He was a decent man who avoided trouble and respected the law. He lived alone, had no family, spending his days only in the company of his faithful horse, Storm, and an old hunting dog, Thunder. Jack chose the shorter route home, which led through an abandoned trail. The trail led to a small creek where he wanted to stop to water his horse. As he approached the water, Thunder began to act restlessly. The dog ran ahead and started barking. What Jack saw then changed his life forever. By the creek lay a tiny figure, motionless. A child, a little girl, who was barely breathing under the cruel sun. Her face was red from sunburn, her lips cracked from thirst. Jack immediately jumped off his horse. He quickly rushed to the girl, carefully lifted her and carried her to the cool water of the creek. He wet his handkerchief and wiped Sarah's face, then slowly gave her water to drink. The girl weakly opened her eyes. If anyone had seen them at that moment, they might have thought they were father and daughter. Jack asked her what had happened, but Sarah was so exhausted she could barely speak. She only whispered that her stepmother had abandoned her, and that her name was Sarah. Jack knew the nearest settlement was several days' journey away, and the girl needed urgent help. He made a decision. He took off his leather jacket, wrapped Sarah in it, and sat her in front of him on the saddle. Thunder followed them happily, as if knowing something good had happened. Join those who follow the most exciting stories of the Wild West week after week. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a single fascinating legend. Jack rode for 2 days with the exhausted little girl. Sarah occasionally spoke deliriously in her fever, calling for her father and mumbling about a clock. Jack arrived at his land on the third morning, at a modest log house near the Colorado River. He immediately put the child to bed and took out the herbs he had learned to use over the years in the solitude of the prairie. In the following days, Jack barely left Sarah's side. He applied compresses to her forehead, made soup for her, and told stories. Constantly told stories so the little girl would feel she wasn't alone. He told tales about the Wild West, his own adventures, and how beautiful life is on the prairie when we learn to live with nature. A week passed before Sarah was strong enough to get out of bed. Jack then asked her where she had lived before and what exactly had happened. Sarah told him about her father's death, her stepmother's cruelty, and how she had abandoned her on the prairie. Jack listened, his face set in hard lines, his fists clenched, but he controlled himself in front of Sarah. He knew that the stepmother's act was not only cruel, but illegal. It counted as attempted murder. But now what mattered was Sarah's safety. In the following weeks, a special bond developed between them. Jack never thought he would have a family, and Sarah had lost all hope that anyone would care for her. Yet now, like two broken souls, they began to heal each other. Sarah helped with work around the house, learned to cook under Jack's guidance, and fell asleep at night with the old dog Thunder. And Jack experienced again what it feels like to have someone to come home to. A month later, Jack decided he had to go to the nearest town, Durango, to officially report what had happened. Sarah was terrified, fearing they would take this new home away from her. Jack promised her that no matter what happens, he would take care of her. In Durango, Jack visited the sheriff, a veteran lawman, William Taggart. He told him Sarah's story and that he would like to officially become her guardian. Sheriff Taggart listened with a serious face, then said he needed to notify the territorial judge and track down the stepmother to hold her accountable. 3 months passed. Jack and Sarah lived together in the small log cabin, as if they had always been family. The little girl was smiling again, helped around the house, and Jack even taught her how to ride. Every evening they sat by the fire, and Jack told stories about the Wild West, the Indians, brave sheriffs, and outlaws who had gone astray. On a cold October morning, however, they had unexpected visitors. Sheriff Taggart rode up to the house with another man who wore an elegant suit. The man was Calvin Pierce, representative of the territorial court. Pierce said they had managed to find Margaret Caldwell in Santa Fe. The woman had already remarried a wealthy merchant, and when confronted with Sarah's story, she denied everything. She claimed the girl had run away from her, and she had been desperately searching for her ever since. Jack angrily burst out, but Pierce cut him off. He explained that without evidence, they couldn't convict the woman under the law. Moreover, Margaret and her new husband, as respectable citizens, were demanding Sarah's return, claiming the girl belonged under their guardianship. Sarah, who had been listening to the conversation from the doorway, ran into the house. Jack followed her and found her crying on the bed. The little girl begged not to be sent back to that monster. Jack promised her that this would not happen. Looking back into Pierce's eyes, he calmly stated that Sarah would stay with him. The lawman sighed and said that in 2 days there would be a hearing in Durango to decide the girl's fate. Until then, Sarah could stay with Jack. After the visitors left, Jack made a decision. He knew that at the hearing, Margaret and her wealthy husband would use all their influence to get Sarah back, not out of love for the little girl, but out of pride and appearances. That evening, Jack packed the most essential items. He loaded both horses with food and blankets. Sarah watched quietly, not asking anything, somehow sensing what was coming. They set out at dawn, heading north, toward Wyoming territory, where Jack knew of a remote valley, far from any settlement, where they could start a new life. Thunder happily ran alongside the horses. For the first time since her father's death, Sarah felt completely safe. But Jack knew that Sarah's stepmother wouldn't leave it at that. He looked up at the sky and wondered how much time they had before they would be found.